Rapid growth of scientific fraud brokers exposed in new study. Imagine a world where scientific research is tainted by fraud, where the pursuit of knowledge is compromised by the pursuit of profit and prestige. Unfortunately, this is the reality we face today, as a recent study reveals that companies brokering and facilitating scientific fraud are not only large and resilient, but also growing at an alarming rate. But here's where it gets even more disturbing. These companies, often referred to as paper mills, are becoming increasingly sophisticated, making it harder to detect and prevent fraudulent research from being published. The study, published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, examined the inner workings of the ARDA Conference, a paper mill that allows academics to add their names to already written scientific papers, which are then accepted for publication in peer-reviewed journals. What's striking is that ARDA openly lists the journals that these papers will be published in, making it easier for researchers to study the phenomenon. In just 6 years, the number of journals listed on ARDA's site skyrocketed from 14 to 86, despite efforts by databases like Web of Science and Scopus to de-index titles found to be cooperating with paper mills. And this is the part most people miss. Paper mills often bribe journal editors to publish poor quality papers, which can have serious consequences for the scientific community. Reese Richardson, a biologist and research integrity expert at Northwestern University, co-authored the study and notes that de-indexing is often seen as an effective tool to counteract paper mills, but it's not working as well as it should. Nandita Quaderi, editor-in-chief for Web of Science, argues that the study uses outdated data, and since December 2021, they have delisted a further 187 journals for failing their editorial requirements. However, Richardson counters that another indicator of the scaling up of organized scientific fraud is the increasing number of retractions issued by academic publishers in batches. Just last week, Retraction Watch reported that the academic publisher Frontiers Media retracted 122 studies published by 5 of its journals, after finding that networks of authors and editors manipulated citations and conducted peer review without disclosing conflicts of interest. This raises a critical question. How can we trust the integrity of scientific research when such blatant fraud is occurring? Mark Robinson, Corporate Media Relations Manager at Taylor Francis, emphasizes that tackling the root causes of misconduct must be a priority for the whole academic community, including institutions, funders, and publishers. But here's the million-dollar question. Can we really expect the academic community to self-regulate and address the pressures on researchers around career advancement, rewards, and incentives? Richardson and his colleagues estimate that the number of papers being pumped out by paper mills is doubling every 1.5 years, whereas the number of retractions is doubling only every 3.5 years. They predict that only 15 to 25% of paper mill products will ever be retracted, leaving us with a staggering amount of fraudulent research in the scientific record. So we have to ask, what's the solution to this growing problem? How can we ensure the integrity of scientific research and prevent paper mills from undermining the trustworthiness of academic publications? We'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Do you think the academic community can self-regulate? Or do we need more stringent measures to prevent scientific fraud? Uncovering the truth, the battle against coordinated publication fraud. Combating coordinated publication fraud is akin to emptying an overflowing bathtub with a spoon. As one study co-author vividly puts it, this stark analogy underscores the immense challenge researchers face in tackling systematic fraud that has outpaced current corrective measures and shows no signs of slowing down. A recent study published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences delves into the pervasive issue of research fraud facilitated by paper mills, brokers, and predatory publishers. These entities are notorious for generating low-quality or fabricated research, selling authorship positions, and bypassing rigorous quality control and peer review processes. Their activities have resulted in a staggering volume of fraudulent research that continues to plague scientific literature. Anna Abaukina, a researcher at Freie Universität Berlin and creator of the Retraction Watch Hijacked Journal Checker, commends the study for highlighting the extent of fraud and exploring various detection methods. She notes the examination of problematic papers, networks, and editors as significant contributions to the field. Investigations into paper mills have spanned over a decade, impacting numerous publishers. Notable examples include Hindawi's massive retraction of thousands of articles and PLOS One's efforts to address fraudulent submissions. These incidents underscore the far-reaching consequences of paper mill activities on the credibility of scientific research. The study reveals that the volume of suspected paper mill products is doubling more than twice as fast as corrective actions, such as retractions and crowdsourced flags on platforms like PubPeer. Co-author Luis Amaral, a professor at Northwestern University, likens this struggle to attempting to empty an overflowing bathtub with a spoon, emphasizing the overwhelming nature of the task. To address this systemic issue, the researchers advocate for a global shift in research incentives. They propose that major stakeholders in the scientific community, including national academies and royal societies, must collaborate to establish and enforce stricter standards. Case studies provide insight into the tactics employed by paper mills. For instance, the researchers analyzed metadata from PLOS One and IEEE conference proceedings, alongside data from the Retraction Watch database and PubPeer comments. They identified networks of editors who disproportionately accepted papers that were later retracted or flagged for concerns. In one notable case, 45 editors, responsible for 1.3% of all articles, accounted for 30.2% of retracted papers. PLOS One has taken proactive steps to mitigate the impact of paper mills. Since detecting increased fraudulent activity 4 to 5 years ago, the company has enhanced its investigation and screening processes for both existing and new submissions. Similarly, IEEE has implemented continuous monitoring and swift action to ensure compliance with its standards. The study also explored image duplication networks across major publishers like Springer Nature, Spandados, Wiley, and Elsevier. Researchers found clusters of papers with duplicated images, with a 34.1% retraction rate among these suspect papers. This innovative approach to identifying fraudulent patterns offers valuable insights into the expansive reach of paper mills. The impact of fraud varies across subfields. RNA biology, for example, has experienced a significantly higher retraction rate compared to other areas. This disparity highlights the need for targeted interventions in compromised fields. Journal hopping, a practice where fraudulent papers are submitted to multiple journals, is another concerning trend. The study analyzed the operations of the Academic Research and Development Association, ARDA, a known paper mill broker. As ARDA's listed journals were deindexed, new publications continued to be added to the list, indicating a persistent cycle of fraudulent activity. Despite ongoing efforts by publishers, only 28.7% of suspected paper mill products have been retracted as of 2020. The study suggests that this figure may underrepresent the true scope of the problem, as it relies on reported instances of scientific fraud. Addressing this crisis requires collective action. Amaral draws parallels between combating publication fraud and addressing the ozone hole, emphasizing the need for comprehensive solutions involving key stakeholders. Individual scientists can contribute by engaging in post-publication peer review and developing high-throughput approaches to identify problematic articles. In conclusion, the battle against coordinated publication fraud is complex and multifaceted. It demands collaboration, innovation, and a commitment to maintaining the integrity of scientific research. Defect to win. How scientific fraud is threatening global research. PNAS study explained. Imagine a world where the pursuit of scientific knowledge is no longer driven by a quest for truth, but by a desire to win at all costs. Unfortunately, this is the reality we're facing today, as a shocking new study reveals that systematic scientific fraud has become a pervasive and rapidly growing threat to the foundations of research worldwide. But here's where it gets controversial. The study suggests that this fraud is not just the result of a few rogue individuals, but rather a coordinated effort by large networks of actors who are exploiting the weaknesses of the current system for their own gain. And this is the part most people miss. The fact that the modern system of academic incentives, which prioritizes quantitative proxies like publication and citation counts, is actually driving this behavior. The study, published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, used a game-theoretic framework to analyze the problem, likening science to a public goods game in which progress is driven by collaboration, trust, and mutual investment. However, as the size and complexity of science have grown, so too have the incentives and opportunities to defect from this game. The authors define defection as the act of choosing to contribute less than other players despite having the means to contribute, and they argue that this behavior is becoming increasingly rational for many junior doctors and budding scientists. But what's driving this behavior? The answer lies in the architecture of fraud, which involves coordinated entities like paper mills, brokerage firms, compliant editors, and unscrupulous journals working together to mass-produce fraudulent research. The study found that certain editors at large journals consistently handled disproportionately many articles that were eventually retracted or received critical comments, and that these editors formed tightly knit clusters that were implicated in most problematic articles at their journals. One particular insight was that the fraud ecosystem has become resilient and adaptable, with organizations like the Academic Research and Development Association, ARDA, in India journal hopping to new journals as soon as existing venues were deindexed or scrutiny of their activities increased. The numbers are sobering. The corpus of suspected paper mill products has been doubling every 1.5 years, which is 10 times faster than legitimate scientific publishing and far outpacing the growth of both retracted and flagged articles. Even aggressive measures like de-indexing journals have been dwarfed by the sheer volume of compromised outlets. So, what's the winning strategy for these fraudsters? The answer is simple. Defecting from the scientific public goods game is the rational way to go, as it allows them to reap the benefits of publication and citation counts without actually contributing to the advancement of knowledge. But here's the thing. This behavior is not just limited to a few bad apples. It's a systemic problem that requires a collective response from the scientific community. As the study's senior author, Luis A. Nunes Amaral, said, "These networks are essentially criminal organizations acting together to fake the process of science. Millions of dollars are involved in these processes. So, what can we do to stop this? The answer is clear. We need coordinated, better resourced, and systematically independent approaches to detect, investigate, and sanction misconduct. We need to rethink the way we incentivize scientific research and prioritize quality over quantity." And we need to ask ourselves some tough questions. What is the true cost of this fraud, and how can we prevent it from undermining the integrity of the scientific record? The future of science is at risk, and it's up to us to take action. But here's the question. Are we willing to take on this challenge, or will we continue to turn a blind eye to the problem? The choice is ours, and the consequences of our actions will be felt for generations to come.